Hello, everyone. I want to talk about this preprint that was just released yesterday. It says Omicron infection enhances neutralizing immunity against the Delta variant. This is research out of the Africa Health Research Institute, which is a research institute in South Africa. And they did a very interesting study. So let's read the abstract together and then we'll go over the paper. So Omicron has been shown to be highly transmissible and have extensive evasion of neutralizing antibody immunity elicited by vaccination and by previous SARS-CoV-2 infection. Omicron infections are rapidly expanding worldwide, often in the face of high levels of Delta infection. Here we characterize developing immunity to Omicron and investigated whether neutralizing immunity elicited by Omicron also enhances neutralizing immunity of the Delta variant. We enrolled both previously vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals who were infected with SARS-CoV-2 in the Omicron infection wave in South Africa soon after symptom onset. We then measured their ability to neutralize both Omicron and Delta virus at enrollment versus a median of 14 days after enrollment. Neutralization of Omicron increased 14-fold over this time, showing a developing antibody response. More importantly, there was an enhancement of Delta virus neutralization, which increased 4.4-fold. The increase in Delta variant neutralization in individuals infected with Omicron may result in decreased ability of Delta to reinfect those individuals, along with emerging data indicating that Omicron at this time in the pandemic is less pathogenic than Delta. Such an outcome may have positive implications in terms of decreasing the tumor COVID-19 burden of severe disease. Okay, so what they're saying here basically is we know that Omicron, that being previously infected with Delta or the other variants doesn't really protect you well against Omicron because Omicron is so different. There's so many changes in the amino acid structure of the spike protein. However, they're wondering, is the reverse true? If you get infected with Omicron, does it protect you against Delta? And their research indicates that it does, which would be a good thing because that would mean that Omicron is protecting you against the previous variant, so that variant isn't likely to come back after Omicron is over if you get infected. Okay, so what they did essentially is they found 15 people that were infected during Omicron, and they took their blood at the time that they were enrolled in the study, which was a median of 4 days after they started having symptoms. So at that point, 4 days at the start, when you start having symptoms, you probably haven't had time for your adaptive immune system to mount a significant antibody response yet. Antibody responses come in about 5 to 7 days after exposure. And so they are kind of naive at that point. Then they check them about 2 weeks after enrollment. And at that point, you should have an antibody response. They said 2 participants did not detectably neutralize Omicron either type 1 and are excluded from the analysis. I don't know why they excluded them, because it made their graphs look a little bit dirtier. I think they should have just left them in there. Their numbers wouldn't have looked quite as good, but I don't know why you would throw these out, but they did. Anyways, they did mention that they did throw them out, so we know that 2 of them basically had a flat response. They had no detectable neutralization of Omicron and none afterward. It would have been interesting to see if they had any change in their Delta reactivity. So what they did is they took plasma from at the time of enrollment, which is about 4 days after symptoms and about 14 days after symptoms. And they did a live neutralization assay, which we talked about in a previous video, talking about how Omicron escapes vaccine neutralization. So basically, a recap, what they do is they take the plasma from these people and they dilute it like 10-fold, 100-fold, 1,000-fold, 10,000-fold. They dilute it and then they mix it with the virus. And they have this virus. They know if we put the full strength virus on this assay, it will create like 50 plaques. It will cause 50 infections in the cell line. And then what they want to do is find out what dilution causes it to drop by half, so down to 25. And so if you can take 1 to 100,000 diluted plasma and it still drops it, that plasma is very neutralizing. It works really well. Okay, so that's essentially what they were doing. And let's go straight to the graphs. All right, so here's the graph. At enrollment, so look at the legend. The green is the vaccinated people. So the vaccinated people, they start off with a little bit of reactivity. So higher, this is a logarithmic scale, okay? This is 1 10, 100,000. So the higher the number, the more you had to dilute the plasma. So the higher is better, basically. So the vaccinated people have higher levels to begin with. And then, see, this graph doesn't look like it trends up very fast. But remember, this is a logarithmic scale. From here to here is a 10-fold increase. So this is an increase. And then you see the unvaccinated people, they start off lower and they kind of end up lower as well. But they have an increase in reactivity as well. So there's a 14-fold increase in Omicron. Now, what you would expect if there was no cross-reactivity, you would expect Delta to be flat, like there'd be no response. But you do see that most of them respond and go up. And here's what's interesting. If you look at it, on average, the people that are vaccinated have a greater Delta response than the unvaccinated people. There was like one vaccinated person where actually it dropped, and this person is pretty flat. And these two go up, but almost everyone in the vaccinated group goes up as well. And then here you see the breakup of their 13 participants. Some of them had Pfizer. Most of them, it's like 4 had Johnson & Johnson, 3 had Pfizer, and 6 had none. And then, so this is the take home thing, is that basically what's important is Omicron seems to give increased protection to Delta, and it seems to be a little bit better if you were previously vaccinated. So what that probably shows is that if your immune system gets more looks at the same thing, it mounts a better response. So if you've been vaccinated, you got to look at the wild type spike protein, and now you're getting a look at the Omicron spike protein, and then you make lots of different antibodies for both of them now, and there's some of them are going to cross react with the other variants, and you can have a better response. Whereas this person probably, he mounted a response, or she mounted a response to Omicron, but this person went down on Delta. So it didn't really help the Delta because the antibodies that they produced here were very specific for Omicron. Whereas if you've seen a wild type, it will make lots of different antibodies, more different kinds, and identify different epitopes. And so this is a very kind of good news, because Omicron is leading in most people to immunity against the previous variants, and it might give better immunity to future variants as well.